When tech millionaire Marcus Chen receives devastating news that his empire is crumbling, he breaks down in tears at his own company's reception desk. But receptionist Emma Walsh, a woman whose gentle heart sees beyond his wealth, offers him something money can't buy: genuine compassion. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The glass towers of downtown Seattle reflected the gray October sky as Marcus Chen stepped out of his black Tesla Model S. At 32, he was the founder and CEO of NovaTech Solutions, a company that had revolutionized cloud computing security. His penthouse office on the 42nd floor overlooked Elliott Bay, and his personal net worth had just crossed the $100 million mark 6 months ago. Everything in his life was precisely calculated, meticulously planned, and ruthlessly optimized for success. Marcus strode through the marble lobby of the Chen Technology Center, the building that bore his name in sleek silver letters. Employees nodded respectfully as he passed, but none dared make eye contact for too long. He preferred it that way. Emotional distance meant fewer complications, fewer vulnerabilities that competitors could exploit. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the polished floor as he approached the security turnstiles, already mentally reviewing the morning's agenda. The reception desk sat like a warm island in the cold expanse of the lobby. Behind it, Emma Walsh arranged fresh flowers in a simple glass vase, humming softly to herself. At 28, she had been the company's head receptionist for 3 years, but Marcus had barely noticed her beyond her functional role. She was simply part of the building's infrastructure, like the elevators or the air conditioning system. Emma looked up as Marcus approached, offering her usual bright smile. "Good morning, Mr. Chen. Beautiful day, isn't it?" she said, gesturing toward the wall of windows where patches of sunlight were beginning to break through the clouds. Marcus paused for a fraction of a second, caught off guard by her genuine warmth. Most people who spoke to him wanted something. Investors seeking his attention, employees angling for promotions, journalists hunting for quotes. Emma's greeting carried no agenda, no hidden motive. It was simply human kindness, offered freely. "Yes," he replied curtly, then caught himself. Something in her expectant expression made him add, "The flowers are nice." Emma's smile widened, lighting up her entire face. "Thank you. I picked them up from Pike Place Market this morning." The vendor said they're called Gerbera daisies. They're supposed to represent cheerfulness and optimism. She paused, then added with a slight blush, "I thought the office could use a little more of both." Marcus found himself studying her face for a moment longer than necessary. Emma had shoulder-length auburn hair that caught the lobby's recessed lighting, and her green eyes held a depth of genuine care that was entirely foreign to his world. She wore a simple navy blazer and white blouse, professional but not expensive. Her makeup was minimal, natural. There was nothing calculated about her appearance, nothing designed to impress or manipulate. "I should get to my office," Marcus said abruptly, uncomfortable with the unfamiliar stirring of something that might have been curiosity. "Of course," Emma replied, her smile never wavering. "Have a wonderful day, Mr. Chen." As Marcus rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, he found himself thinking about Emma's words: cheerfulness and optimism. When was the last time he had felt either of those emotions? His life was a series of quarterly reports, board meetings, and strategic acquisitions. Success was measured in stock prices and market share, not in feelings as ephemeral as cheerfulness. His corner office was a monument to achievement. Awards lined the walls, including the Technology Innovator of the Year trophy he had received just 2 months ago. His desk, a massive slab of polished walnut, held 3 monitors displaying real-time market data, company metrics, and his packed calendar. Everything was perfect, controlled, optimized. Marcus settled into his leather executive chair and opened his laptop. The first email in his inbox was from his assistant Sarah, marked urgent. Conference call with the board moved to 9 a.m. Critical matter requires immediate attention. He frowned. The board meeting wasn't scheduled until next week. Marcus prided himself on always being ahead of every development in his company. Surprises were inefficiencies, and inefficiencies were unacceptable. At exactly 9 o'clock, Marcus dialed into the conference call. The voice of board chairman Robert Sterling filled his office through the speakerphone, but the usual deference was absent. Instead, Sterling's tone was cold, businesslike. "Marcus, we need to discuss the SEC investigation that was announced this morning." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "What investigation? You haven't seen the news?" Sterling's voice carried a note of disbelief. "The Securities and Exchange Commission is launching a formal investigation into NovaTech's accounting practices. They're alleging potential fraud in how we've reported our government contract revenues." Marcus's hands went cold. He pulled up the financial news websites on his computer, and there it was, blazoned across every major outlet. Tech wunderkind Marcus Chen under federal investigation for securities fraud. "This is impossible," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our accounting is flawless. I personally review every major contract." "That's what makes this so damaging," Sterling replied. "The SEC claims they have a whistleblower from inside the company, someone with detailed knowledge of our financial reporting structure. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now, back to the story. The room seemed to tilt around Marcus. A whistleblower. Someone he trusted, someone with access to sensitive information, had betrayed him. The government contracts that had made NovaTech's explosive growth possible were now being questioned. If the SEC found irregularities, even innocent ones, the company would face massive fines, regulatory sanctions, and the complete destruction of their reputation. "What's the board's position?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. There was a long pause. When Sterling spoke again, his voice was carefully measured. "The board has voted to suspend you from all operational duties, pending the outcome of the investigation. Patricia Wilson will serve as interim CEO." The words hit Marcus harder than any physical pain he had ever experienced. His company, his life's work, was being taken from him based on accusations he didn't even understand. Patricia Wilson was the company's chief operating officer, a competent executive but someone who had always resented Marcus's youth and success. "You can't do this," Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. "This company exists because of me. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every contract came from my vision." "The board's decision is final," Sterling replied. "We'll need you to clean out your office by end of business today. Security will escort you from the building." The call ended with the sharp click of disconnected lines. Marcus sat in his chair, staring at the phone, unable to process what had just happened. 30 minutes ago, he had been one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Seattle. Now he was unemployed, under federal investigation, and facing the complete collapse of everything he had built. His phone buzzed with notifications. Text messages from investors, journalists, and competitors were flooding in. Marcus's hands shook as he tried to read them, but the words blurred together. Stock price plummeting. Investigation details. Speculation about criminal charges. He stood up abruptly, his chair spinning behind him. The walls of his office felt like they were closing in. The awards and trophies that had once represented his achievements now seemed to mock him. How quickly success could turn to failure. How easily a life's work could crumble. Marcus walked to the window and looked down at the city spread out below. 42 floors down, people were going about their normal lives, unaware that his world was ending. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass and felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. Complete helplessness. The next few hours passed in a haze of humiliation. Security guards arrived to escort him as he packed his personal belongings into cardboard boxes. Employees who had once competed for his attention now avoided eye contact, whispering among themselves as he passed. The company he had built from nothing was already moving on without him. Marcus found himself in the elevator, descending from the 42nd floor for what might be the last time. The weight of the boxes in his arms seemed insignificant compared to the crushing weight of his failure. As the floors ticked by on the digital display, he realized he had nowhere to go. His penthouse apartment would feel like a mausoleum. His few friends were all business associates who would distance themselves from the scandal. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby, and Marcus stepped out into the space that had once felt like the entrance to his kingdom. Now it felt like a courthouse where he had just been sentenced. A few employees hurried past, avoiding his gaze. The security guards flanked him like he was a criminal being perp-walked. As they approached the main entrance, Marcus's legs suddenly felt unsteady. The magnitude of his situation crashed over him like a wave. Federal investigation, company suspension, public humiliation. Criminal charges were possible. Prison was possible. Everything he had worked for, sacrificed for, lived for, was gone. He stumbled slightly, and one of the cardboard boxes slipped from his arms, spilling its contents across the marble floor. His college diploma, family photos, and the small cactus plant his sister had given him for his office scattered at his feet. The security guards moved to help him, but Marcus waved them away. As he knelt to gather his belongings, something inside him broke. The careful control he had maintained his entire adult life shattered like glass. Tears, hot and unexpected, began streaming down his face. He tried to stop them, tried to maintain some dignity, but they came harder and faster. The lobby had gone silent. Other employees pretended not to notice, but Marcus could feel their stares. He was crying in public, in his own building, in front of people who had once looked up to him. The humiliation was complete. Then he heard footsteps approaching, and a gentle voice said, "Mr. Chen, are you okay?" Marcus looked up through his tears to see Emma Walsh kneeling beside him. She had left her position behind the reception desk and was carefully collecting his scattered belongings, placing them gently back in the box. Her movements were deliberate, respectful of his dignity, even in this moment of complete breakdown. "I'm fine," Marcus said automatically, though his voice betrayed him with its rawness. Emma paused in her gathering and looked directly at him. Her green eyes held no judgment, no pity, just genuine concern for another human being in pain. "No, you're not," she said softly. "And that's okay." The simple acknowledgement of his pain, spoken without condescension or false sympathy, somehow made it bearable. Emma finished collecting his belongings and stood, extending her hand to help him up. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then took her hand and allowed her to pull him to his feet. "Is there anything I can do?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper so the security guards couldn't hear. Marcus looked into her face and saw something he had forgotten existed. Pure human kindness offered without expectation of return. In a world where every interaction was transactional, every relationship calculated for mutual benefit, Emma's compassion was like discovering water in a desert. "I don't think anyone can help me now," Marcus replied honestly. Emma glanced around the lobby, then made a decision. She walked over to the reception desk and spoke quietly to her colleague, who nodded and took her place. Then she returned to Marcus's side. "Come with me," she said simply. Emma led Marcus away from the curious stares and whispered conversations, down a corridor he had never noticed despite working in the building for 5 years. At the end of the hallway was a small employee break room, empty at this hour of the morning. She guided him to a chair at a simple wooden table and disappeared momentarily, returning with a steaming cup of coffee and a box of tissues. "I know it's not much," Emma said, settling into the chair across from him. "But sometimes the smallest gestures matter most when everything else feels overwhelming." Marcus wrapped his hands around the warm mug, grateful for something solid to hold on to. The coffee was better than what his executive assistant usually brought him, rich and comforting rather than just functional. He realized he had never been in this break room before, had never even known it existed. It was modest but welcoming, with employee photos taped to a bulletin board, and a small bookshelf filled with paperback novels that people had left for others to enjoy. "You don't have to stay with me," Marcus said, his voice still rough from crying. "I'm sure you have work to do." Emma shook her head. "My colleague is covering the desk. Besides, this is more important right now." She paused, studying his face with genuine concern. "I saw the news this morning. It must be terrifying to have your entire world turned upside down so suddenly." The fact that she had seen the news reports somehow made it more real. By now, the story would be spreading across social media, business journals, and tech blogs. His reputation, built over years of careful work, was being destroyed in real time by people who had never met him. "I built this company from nothing," Marcus said, more to himself than to Emma. "I was 23 when I started NovaTech in my apartment. No investors, no connections, just an idea, and the determination to make it work. I mortgaged everything, worked 18-hour days, sacrificed every relationship I had. Emma listened without interrupting, her expression attentive and patient. Most people in Marcus's life were always rushing to the next topic, the next meeting, the next opportunity. Emma seemed content to simply be present in this moment, to offer the gift of her complete attention. The first government contract was the breakthrough, Marcus continued. Department of Defense needed a new cybersecurity protocol for their cloud infrastructure. We underbid every major competitor and delivered 6 months ahead of schedule. That contract led to 5 more, then 10 more. Within 3 years, we went from 3 employees to 300. You must be incredibly proud of what you built, Emma said softly. Marcus looked at her in surprise. Most people would have focused on the current crisis, the investigation, the humiliation. Emma had chosen to acknowledge his achievements first, to recognize the human being behind the headlines. I was proud, Marcus admitted. Maybe too proud. I thought success made me invulnerable. I thought if I just worked harder, planned better, controlled every variable, nothing could touch me. He laughed bitterly. Turns out, I was wrong. Emma reached across the table and placed her hand gently over his. The contact was brief, appropriate, but it grounded him in a way that surprised him. Being vulnerable doesn't make you weak, she said. It makes you human. For the first time since the phone call that morning, Marcus felt like he could breathe properly. Emma's presence had created a pocket of calm in the storm of his life. He found himself really looking at her, noticing details he had never bothered to see before. There were small laugh lines around her eyes that suggested she smiled often. Her hands were calloused in a way that indicated she did work beyond typing and answering phones. She wore a simple silver necklace with a small pendant that looked handmade. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know me. Not really. For 3 years, I've barely acknowledged your existence. Emma considered his question carefully before answering. My dad was a construction foreman, she said. When I was 12, his company went under because the owner had been embezzling money. Dad wasn't involved in any wrongdoing, but he lost his job anyway. I watched him go through exactly what you're experiencing now. The shame, the fear, the feeling that everything he had worked for was meaningless. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. What happened to him? He struggled for a while, Emma admitted. But eventually he realized that his worth as a person wasn't determined by his job title or his bank account. He started his own small contracting business, and while he never got rich, he found something more valuable. He found peace with who he was, not just what he accomplished. The parallel was uncomfortable but illuminating. Marcus had never considered the possibility that his identity existed separate from his professional success. For as long as he could remember, he had been defined by his achievements, his net worth, his position in the corporate hierarchy. I've never thought about it that way, Marcus said honestly. Success has been everything to me for so long that I'm not sure who I am without it. Emma smiled, and Marcus realized it was the first genuine smile directed at him that wasn't motivated by business considerations or social obligation. Maybe this is your chance to find out, she said. Scary as it is, sometimes life forces us to discover parts of ourselves we never knew existed. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the weight of the morning's events still pressing down on Marcus but no longer crushing him entirely. Through the small window of the break room, he could see employees arriving for work, going about their normal routines. The world was continuing to function despite his personal catastrophe. I should ask, Marcus said suddenly, won't you get in trouble for this? For leaving your post to sit with me? Emma shrugged. Maybe, but I'd rather get in trouble for showing compassion than for ignoring someone who needed help. She paused, then added with a slight smile. Besides, technically you're still my boss for a few more hours. The joke was gentle, without malice, and Marcus found himself almost smiling for the first time that day. I don't think my authority carries much weight anymore. Authority and leadership are different things, Emma said thoughtfully. Authority comes from titles and organizational charts. Leadership comes from how you treat people, especially when you have nothing to gain from treating them well. Her insight surprised him. In his world of MBA graduates and management consultants, people often confused authority with leadership, position with influence. Emma, with her receptionist desk and community college degree, understood the distinction more clearly than most executives he knew. Marcus's phone buzzed with another notification, and he instinctively reached for it before stopping himself. The constant stream of messages, emails, and news alerts would only make his anxiety worse. For the first time in years, he chose not to check his phone immediately. "Good decision," Emma said, noticing his restraint. "The world will keep spinning for a few more minutes without your immediate attention." "I'm not used to being disconnected," Marcus admitted. "I usually check my phone every few minutes. I sleep with it next to my bed in case something urgent comes up." Emma looked genuinely concerned. "That sounds exhausting. When do you rest? When do you just exist without having to respond to something or solve something?" The question revealed a truth Marcus had never wanted to acknowledge. He couldn't remember the last time he had simply existed, without an agenda, without a goal to accomplish or a problem to solve. Even his rare vacations were working vacations, opportunities to network or think strategically about the company's future. "I don't, really," he said quietly. "I convinced myself that constant motion was the same thing as progress, that being busy meant being important." "And how did that work out?" Emma asked, not unkindly. Marcus considered the question seriously. "I built a successful company, made a lot of money, and earned recognition in my industry. But I also don't have any real friends, haven't spoken to my family in months, and apparently don't know my employees well enough to spot a potential whistleblower." He paused, the full impact of his isolation hitting him. "I achieved everything I thought I wanted, and ended up completely alone." Emma leaned forward slightly, her expression earnest. "You're not alone right now." The simple statement carried more weight than any business contract Marcus had ever signed. Here was someone who had no obligation to care about his problems, no incentive to offer comfort, no agenda beyond basic human decency. And yet she had chosen to stay with him in his darkest moment. "Why do you work here?" Marcus asked suddenly. "You're clearly intelligent, insightful, capable. You could probably do anything you wanted." Emma smiled at the compliment. "I like helping people," she said simply. "Every person who walks through that lobby is having some kind of day, good or bad. I get to be the first face they see, the first interaction that might make their day a little brighter or a little easier. It's not glamorous work, but it matters to me." Marcus tried to imagine finding satisfaction in such simple interactions. His version of helping people involved complex technological solutions, multi-million-dollar contracts, and strategic business partnerships. Emma found meaning in fresh flowers and warm greetings. "Don't you want more, though?" Marcus pressed. "Financial security, career advancement, recognition for your talents?" Emma considered his question carefully. "I have enough financial security for my needs. I live in a small apartment that I love, I can pay my bills, and I have some savings for emergencies. As for recognition, I get that every day from the people I help, even if it's just a smile or a thank you." She paused, then asked, "What about you? Did having more make you happier?" The question stopped Marcus cold. He had spent so many years focused on acquiring more wealth, more success, more recognition, that he had never stopped to ask whether any of it had actually improved his life. His penthouse apartment was beautiful but felt empty. His expensive car was impressive but just a way to get from one meeting to another. His growing bank account was satisfying in an abstract way but didn't translate into joy or contentment. "No," he admitted finally, "having more just made me want even more." "It was never enough," Emma nodded knowingly. "My grandmother used to say that trying to fill an emotional void with material things is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You can keep pouring, but it will never be full." The metaphor hit Marcus with uncomfortable accuracy. He had been pouring achievements and acquisitions into a bucket with a hole in the bottom for years, never understanding why satisfaction remained elusive. "So what do you do when you realize the bucket has a hole?" Marcus asked. "You fix the hole," Emma said simply. You figure out what's really missing and address that instead of just adding more stuff on top. Before Marcus could respond, the door to the break room opened and Patricia Wilson walked in. She was dressed in an expensive navy suit, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her expression coldly professional. Behind her stood two security guards Marcus recognized from the lobby. "Marcus," Patricia said, her tone carefully neutral, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to discuss the transition process." The real world had found them. Marcus felt his brief sanctuary dissolving as the weight of his situation crashed back down on him. He stood slowly, suddenly aware of his wrinkled shirt and red-rimmed eyes. "Of course," he said, trying to summon some dignity. Patricia's gaze flicked to Emma, who had also stood and was quietly clearing away the coffee cup and tissues. "Miss Walsh, I'm sure you have duties to attend to." "Yes, ma'am," Emma replied politely, but she caught Marcus's eye and gave him an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. As Emma left the break room, Marcus felt the warmth and safety of their conversation evaporating. Patricia represented everything he had built and everything he was now losing. She was competent, ambitious, and ruthlessly focused on success. In many ways, she was exactly like him. "The board has asked me to oversee your departure," Patricia said once they were alone with the security guards. "I want you to know this isn't personal, Marcus. It's just business." The phrase stung more than Patricia probably intended. Just business. That had been Marcus's approach to everything for so long that he had forgotten how to see people as anything other than assets or obstacles. Emma had shown him a different way of being in the world, even if only for an hour. "I understand," Marcus said quietly. As the security guards escorted him through the lobby one final time, Marcus looked toward the reception desk. Emma was back at her post, helping an elderly man who seemed confused about which elevator to take. She spoke to him with the same patience and kindness she had shown Marcus, treating him like the most important person in the building. For just a moment, Emma glanced up and met Marcus's eyes. She didn't smile or wave, understanding that such gestures would be inappropriate given the circumstances. Instead, she simply nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement and quiet support. As Marcus stepped through the glass doors of the building that had once been his kingdom, he realized that Emma Walsh had given him something more valuable than any business contract or financial instrument. She had shown him what it looked like to be genuinely human in a world that often forgot the importance of simple compassion. The October air was crisp against his face as he stood on the sidewalk, holding his cardboard boxes and contemplating an uncertain future. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Chen had no plan, no strategy, no clear path forward. It was terrifying and, in a way he couldn't yet fully understand, liberating. 3 weeks after his world collapsed, Marcus Chen sat in a coffee shop he had never noticed before, despite walking past it countless times during his years of success. The Grind Cafe was nothing like the upscale establishments he used to frequent for business meetings. Mismatched furniture filled the space, local artwork covered the walls, and the barista knew most customers by name. It was warm, genuine, and completely removed from the sterile corporate environment that had once defined his existence. Marcus had been coming here every morning since the second week of his exile from NovaTech, not because the coffee was exceptional, though it was good, but because the anonymity allowed him to think without the weight of expectations or the pressure of performance metrics. Here, he was just another customer, not a disgraced tech mogul whose face had appeared on the front page of the business section. The federal investigation was moving slowly, which his lawyer assured him was actually positive news. The SEC was being thorough, but had found no evidence of deliberate fraud. The whistleblower's allegations were beginning to look more like misunderstandings than criminal activity. However, the court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict, and Marcus's reputation in the tech industry was effectively destroyed. He opened his laptop and stared at the email he had been trying to write for the past hour. It was a message to his sister Jenny, who lived in Portland with her husband and 2 young children. They had grown apart over the years as Marcus became increasingly consumed by his business, and he wasn't sure she would even want to hear from him now. The cursor blinked accusingly in the empty message field. How do you explain to family that you had become so focused on success that you forgot how to be a brother, a son, a human being? How do you apologize for years of missed birthdays, Cancelled visits and phone calls that were too brief and too infrequent. Marcus closed the laptop without sending anything. He wasn't ready yet. His phone buzzed with a text message from his financial advisor. The liquidation of his NovaTech stock options was complete, and after paying legal fees and settling some outstanding obligations, Marcus had enough money to live comfortably for several years without working. It should have been reassuring, but instead it felt hollow. Money had always been a scorecard for him, a way of measuring progress and success. Now it was just numbers in an account, devoid of meaning or purpose. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Marcus looked up to see Emma Walsh entering with a gentle smile for the barista. She was dressed casually in jeans and a soft gray sweater, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger outside the corporate environment, more relaxed and natural. Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with genuine pleasure at seeing her. Since leaving NovaTech, he had thought about her often, wondering how she was handling the changes at the company and whether she remembered their conversation in the break room. He had considered reaching out to her, but had ultimately decided against it. What could he offer her now that he was no longer the successful CEO she had comforted in his moment of crisis? Emma collected her coffee and turned to survey the seating area. When her eyes met Marcus's, her face lit up with genuine warmth and surprise. "Marcus," she said, approaching his table. "What a nice surprise. How are you doing?" The question was asked with the same sincere concern she had shown in the break room, as if his public disgrace and professional downfall were irrelevant to her opinion of him as a person. "I'm surviving," Marcus said, standing to greet her properly. "Would you like to sit down? I mean, if you're not meeting someone else." Emma glanced around the cafe, then smiled. "I'd love to. I was just grabbing coffee before running some errands, but errands can wait." As she settled into the chair across from him, Marcus felt the same sense of calm that had enveloped him during their first real conversation. Emma had a gift for making him feel seen and heard, not judged or analyzed. "I have to admit, I'm surprised to see you here," Emma said, stirring honey into her coffee. "This doesn't seem like your usual kind of place." Marcus laughed, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. "You're right. 3 months ago, I would have walked past this place without even noticing it. Now it's become my regular morning spot." "What changed?" Emma asked, though her tone suggested she already understood. "Everything," Marcus said simply. "When your entire identity is wrapped up in being successful and important, losing those things forces you to figure out who you actually are underneath all of that." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "And what are you discovering?" The question was more complex than it appeared. Marcus had been asking himself the same thing for weeks, and the answers were often uncomfortable. "I'm discovering that I spent so many years focused on building an empire that I forgot to build a life," he said. "I'm discovering that I don't actually know how to be happy without an agenda or a goal to accomplish." "That sounds lonely," Emma observed gently. "It is," Marcus admitted. "But it's also liberating in a strange way. For the first time since college, I can make choices based on what I actually want, rather than what will advance my career or increase my net worth." Emma took a sip of her coffee, considering his words. "So what do you actually want?" The question stopped Marcus short. It was so fundamental, so basic, and yet he realized he had no immediate answer. His wants had been so thoroughly aligned with professional success for so long that he had lost touch with his genuine desires and interests. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I'm starting to figure it out. For instance, I've been reading fiction for the first time in probably 10 years. I picked up a novel last week just because the cover looked interesting, not because it was on some business reading list or recommended by a mentor." Emma's eyes brightened with interest. "What book?" "The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Have you read it?" "It's one of my favorites," Emma said enthusiastically. "What did you think?" Marcus considered the question. "It made me think about the difference between pursuing treasure and pursuing purpose. The main character spends the whole book searching for literal treasure, but what he actually finds is himself and his place in the world." "That's a beautiful interpretation," Emma said. "And maybe relevant to your current situation." The parallel was obvious but not simplistic. Marcus had spent years pursuing the treasure of financial success and professional recognition. But his recent forced exile was giving him the opportunity to discover something more valuable and more lasting. "How are things at NovaTech?" Marcus asked, changing the subject slightly. "I know Patricia is competent, but I'm curious how the transition is going." Emma's expression grew thoughtful, perhaps even slightly troubled. "She's definitely competent," she agreed carefully. "Very focused on efficiency and cost-cutting. She's implemented some changes that have improved productivity." Marcus detected something unsaid in her response. "But?" Emma hesitated, clearly conflicted about criticizing her current boss to her former one. "It's not my place to judge management decisions," she said diplomatically. "Emma, you can speak freely with me," Marcus said gently. "I'm not looking for ammunition against Patricia, and I'm certainly not in a position to do anything with whatever information you might share. I'm just curious about the place I spent so many years building." Emma studied his face, apparently satisfied with his sincerity. "The atmosphere has changed," she said finally. "There's less collaboration, less creativity. People seem more focused on following rules and hitting metrics than on innovation or problem solving. The break room where we talked has been converted into additional storage space." The detail about the break room hit Marcus harder than he expected. That small, humble space had been where Emma had shown him genuine human kindness in his darkest moment. Now it was storage space, repurposed for maximum efficiency. Patricia also eliminated the employee suggestion program and the quarterly team-building events, Emma continued. She said they were inefficient uses of time and money. The fresh flowers in the lobby were deemed an unnecessary expense. Marcus felt a pang of regret. He had implemented those programs because he believed that happy employees were more productive employees. But his motivations had been ultimately self-serving. Emma had maintained fresh flowers because she believed they made people's days a little brighter, which was an entirely different and more genuine motivation. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. "I know those things mattered to you." Emma shrugged, but Marcus could see the disappointment in her eyes. "Change is inevitable in any organization, I understand that. Understanding something and accepting it are different things," Marcus observed. "You don't have to pretend it doesn't bother you." Emma smiled slightly at being given permission to express her true feelings. "You're right. It does bother me. Not because I think my way of doing things is necessarily better, but because it feels like we've lost something important. The company is more efficient now, but it's also less human." The observation crystallized something Marcus had been thinking about for weeks. In his drive to build a successful company, he had at least tried to maintain some connection to the human element of business. Patricia, in her drive to optimize everything, was eliminating those connections in favor of pure efficiency. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marcus said. Emma nodded encouragingly. "Are you happy there? Still, I mean. Is NovaTech still a place where you want to work?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the question. "I'm grateful for my job," she said finally. "The salary is good, the benefits are solid, and I have responsibilities that challenge me. But if I'm being completely honest, I miss the version of the company where people felt comfortable bringing their whole selves to work." Marcus realized that Emma was describing exactly what he had been feeling about his own life. The pursuit of optimization and efficiency had stripped away the messy, unpredictable, but ultimately essential human elements that made work meaningful. "What would you do if you could do anything?" Marcus asked. "If practical considerations like salary and benefits weren't factors." Emma's face lit up with a passion Marcus had never seen before. "I'd love to work with nonprofit organizations. Maybe helping them with community outreach and volunteer coordination. I've always believed that the best way to solve problems is to bring people together and help them discover they have more in common than they realized." The vision was so perfectly aligned with Emma's natural gifts that Marcus wondered why she wasn't already doing it. "What's stopping you?" "Reality," Emma said with a rueful laugh. "Nonprofit salaries don't pay for health insurance and rent in Seattle. I have student loans to pay off, and a car that needs replacing soon. Dreams are wonderful, but bills are bills." Marcus understood the dilemma intimately, though from the opposite perspective. He had been so focused on earning money that he had forgotten to consider whether his work was meaningful. Emma was so focused on meaningful work that she felt trapped by financial necessity. "Have you ever considered starting your own organization?" Marcus asked. "Something that could bridge the gap between meaningful work and financial sustainability." Emma looked intrigued but skeptical. "I've thought about it, but I don't have any business training or startup capital. I know how to help people and coordinate volunteers, but I don't know the first thing about creating a sustainable business model." An idea began forming in Marcus's mind, sparked by their conversation but rooted in weeks of reflection about his own values and priorities. "What if you didn't have to figure it out alone?" Emma raised an eyebrow questioningly. "I have business experience and access to capital," Marcus continued, his excitement growing as the idea took shape. "You have passion, vision, and a genuine understanding of how to help people. What if we worked together to create something that combined both skill sets?" Emma stared at him in surprise. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Marcus said, realizing as he spoke that he had never been more certain about anything in his professional life. "I've been trying to figure out what I want to do next. What would give my life meaning and purpose? This conversation has made me realize that I want to use my experience to build something that actually helps people, not just generates profit." Emma was quiet for several minutes, clearly processing the unexpected proposal. Marcus could see her weighing the possibilities against the risks, considering the implications of partnering with someone whose reputation had been so publicly damaged. "What kind of organization are you envisioning?" she asked finally. Marcus leaned forward, energized by her interest. "Something that addresses the gap between people who want to help and communities that need help. A platform that connects volunteers with meaningful opportunities, but also provides training, resources, and ongoing support to make sure the help is actually helpful." Emma's eyes began to shine with possibility. "Like a comprehensive volunteer coordination service that treats community service as seriously as any other professional development." "Exactly," Marcus said. "We could partner with businesses to create meaningful corporate volunteer programs, work with schools to integrate service learning into curricula, and develop training programs that help volunteers understand the communities they're serving." The vision was taking shape as they spoke, combining Marcus's strategic thinking with Emma's intuitive understanding of human nature and community dynamics. For the first time since his fall from grace, Marcus felt genuinely excited about the future. "It would be a big risk for both of us," Emma said thoughtfully. "You'd be putting your remaining resources into an unproven concept, and I'd be leaving a stable job for something that might not work." Marcus nodded, acknowledging the reality of what he was proposing. "It would be a leap of faith," he agreed. "But maybe that's exactly what both of us need right now. A chance to build something meaningful from the ground up, to create the kind of organization we wish existed in the world." Emma smiled, and Marcus could see the same spark of possibility in her eyes that he felt in his own chest. "When you put it that way, how could I say no?" As they left the coffee shop together, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not the desperate hope of someone trying to reclaim past glory, but the quiet confidence of someone who had found a new direction worth pursuing. Emma had once again shown him a different way of seeing the world, and this time, he was ready to embrace it completely. After dropping Isabella at school, Sophia headed to her day job at the Riverside Community Center. The building was old and underfunded, its walls painted in cheerful colors that couldn't quite hide the wear and tear of decades of use. But it was a place of hope, where kids from tough neighborhoods came to dream of better futures. "Sophia, thank God you're here," called Maria Santos, the center's director, as Sophia walked through the front doors. "The new computers are being delivered today, and I have no idea how to set them up." Sophia smiled, genuinely this time. This was her element, helping kids access the tools they needed to succeed. "Don't worry, Maria. I learned a few things about computers in high school. I'll figure it out." As she worked to unpack and configure the donated machines, Sophia's mind drifted back to those high school days. She'd been the girl who tutored struggling students, who believed education could lift anyone out of poverty. And there had been a boy, quiet and brilliant, who'd helped her see that technology could be magic in the right hands. Alexander Chen. Even thinking his name sent shivers through her body. She'd recognized him last night, of course she had. Time might have chiseled his features into aristocratic sharpness, and success might have given him an aura of untouchable power, but those eyes were the same ones that had looked at her with teenage devotion 15 years ago. The same eyes Isabella had inherited. Sophia's hands trembled as she connected cables and powered up monitors. She'd spent over a decade building walls around that truth, protecting herself and her daughter from the complications that acknowledgement would bring. Alexander Chen was one of the richest men in America now. What would he want with a former girlfriend who cleaned offices and raised his child in a two-bedroom apartment? "Miss Sophia, this is so cool!" called out 7-year-old Miguel, one of the after-school program kids, as the computers came to life. "Can you teach me how to make games like that rich guy on TV?" "What rich guy?" Sophia asked, though her heart was already sinking. "Alexander Chen! My cousin says he made all the apps on his phone. Says he's like a real-life superhero, but with money instead of powers." Sophia managed a weak smile. "Maybe we should start with learning to type first, Miguel." But the boy's innocent words echoed in her head all day. Alexander had achieved everything he'd dreamed of in high school and more. He lived in a world of private jets and board meetings, of charity galas and society photographs. What place could there be in that world for a cleaning lady and her 12-year-old daughter? That evening, as Sophia prepared for another night shift, she found a bouquet of simple white roses waiting outside her apartment door. The card read, "Thank you for your hard work. A.C." Her hands shook as she held the card. Alexander Chen. Even his initials sent her back to high school, to love notes passed in hallways and dreams shared under star-filled skies. He remembered her. That much was clear. But what did he want? And more importantly, what was she prepared to risk to find out? At Chen Industries that night, Alexander waited in his office with the nervous energy of a teenager asking someone to prom. He'd rehearsed a dozen conversations, planned out subtle ways to learn more about Sophia's past without revealing his own suspicions. But when she appeared in his doorway at her usual time, all his careful planning evaporated. "Thank you for the flowers," Sophia said quietly, her cleaning cart positioned between them like a protective barrier. They were beautiful. "You're welcome. I thought you might appreciate something nice after working so hard." Sophia began her cleaning routine, but Alexander could sense the tension in her movements, the careful way she avoided looking directly at him. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions and half-buried memories. "Sophia," he said finally, unable to bear the pretense any longer, "can I ask you something personal?" Her hand stilled on the surface she was polishing. "I suppose. Have you always lived in Seattle?" A shadow crossed her face. "Most of my life. I moved here when Isabella was born." "Where did you live before that?" Sophia's knuckles whitened as she gripped her cleaning cloth. "A small town outside Portland." "Lincoln." Alexander's heart stopped. Lincoln. The same small town where they'd met, where they'd fallen in love, where his world had ended when her family disappeared overnight. "Lincoln's a nice place," he managed to say, his voice carefully neutral. "Small but friendly. I spent some time there myself as a teenager." Sophia looked up sharply, and for a moment, their eyes met across the space between them. Alexander saw recognition there, quickly suppressed but undeniably real. She knew exactly who he was. "It was a long time ago," Sophia said carefully. "I was very young when I left." "Sometimes the things that happen when we're young shape everything that comes after," Alexander said softly. "Sometimes we carry them with us forever, even when we think we've moved on." Sophia set down her cleaning supplies and faced him fully for the first time since entering his office. "Mr. Chen, why are you really asking me these questions?" The moment stretched between them, heavy with 15 years of silence and secrets. Alexander could feel the weight of the love letters in his desk drawer, the DNA test he'd already arranged, the private investigator's report that would arrive tomorrow with confirmation of what his heart already knew. "Because I think we knew each other once," he said finally. "A long time ago, when we were different people living different lives." Sophia's composure cracked, and he saw the girl he'd loved hiding behind the woman's careful mask. "Alexander," she whispered, and his name on her lips was like coming home after years of wandering in the wilderness. "Hello, Sophia," he said gently. I've missed you." Tears spilled down her cheeks as 15 years of buried emotion came flooding back. "I thought you'd forgotten me. I thought when I left without saying goodbye, that was the end of our story." Alexander stood and moved toward her, slowly, as if approaching a frightened deer. "I could never forget you. I wrote you letters, dozens of them. I kept writing long after I stopped believing you'd ever read them." "Letters?" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Alexander opened his desk drawer and pulled out the wooden box. Sophia's eyes widened as she recognized it. The same box where he'd kept her picture and the small gift she'd given him in high school. "I wrote to you every week for 2 years after you left," he said, opening the box to reveal the stack of cream-colored envelopes. "I poured my heart into these pages, told you about college, about my dreams, about how much I loved you and missed you. I kept writing even when the letters came back undelivered." Sophia stared at the letters as if they were sacred relics. "You kept them all these years? They were all I had left of us. All I had left of the person I was when I was with you." Slowly, reverently, Sophia reached out and touched the top envelope. Her name was written across it in Alexander's younger handwriting, and seeing it made her breath catch. "Alexander, there's something I need to tell you," she began, but he gently shook his head. "I know about Isabella," he said softly. "I figured it out last night. The timing, her age, those eyes that are exactly like mine. She's our daughter, isn't she?" Sophia's legs gave out, and she sank into the chair across from his desk. The secret she'd carried for 12 years, the weight that had pressed on her chest every day since Isabella's birth, was finally in the open. "I tried to find you when I discovered I was pregnant," she whispered. "But your family had moved too, and I was 17 and scared and alone. I thought maybe it was better that way. You had such big dreams, such a bright future ahead of you. I didn't want to hold you back." Alexander knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Hold me back? Sophia, you were my future. Everything I built, every success I achieved, it was all empty because you weren't there to share it with me." "But look at what you became," Sophia protested. "Look at this empire you built. You're one of the most successful men in the world. If you'd been tied down with a teenage pregnancy with someone from the wrong side of town, I would have been the luckiest man alive," Alexander interrupted fiercely. "Do you know what I've done with all this success, Sophia? I've spent 15 years in a prison of my own making, surrounded by people who only see my bank account, living in a penthouse that echoes with loneliness. I have everything money can buy and nothing that actually matters." Sophia looked up into his eyes, seeing the pain and longing she'd tried so hard to forget. "Alexander, I clean your office 5 nights a week. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment and shop at thrift stores. Isabella and I, we're not part of your world." "You are my world," he said simply. "You always were. Everything else is just noise." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of revelation settling between them. Outside, Seattle glittered in the darkness, 8 million people living their lives, while 2 former lovers rediscovered a connection that had never truly been broken. "What happens now?" Sophia asked finally. Alexander squeezed her hands gently. "Now I meet my daughter. Now I try to earn back the 15 years I lost. Now I prove to both of you that love is more powerful than pride or fear or the stupid mistakes we made when we were too young to know better." Sophia wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture so familiar it made Alexander's heart ache. "She's an amazing girl, Alexander, smart and funny and kind. She's going to have so many questions." "Then we'll answer them together," Alexander said. "All of them honestly. No more secrets, no more missed chances. We owe her that much. We owe ourselves that much." As Sophia gathered her cleaning supplies to leave, Alexander carefully placed the love letters back in their box. Tomorrow, he would share them with his daughter, would show her the words her teenage father had written to the mother he'd never stopped loving. "Sophia," he called as she reached the door. She turned back, and in her eyes he saw not just the successful woman she'd become, but traces of the hopeful girl who had once believed in forever. "This time, I'm not letting you disappear," he said. "This time, we're going to get our happy ending." Sophia smiled, the first truly radiant smile he'd seen from her since they'd reunited. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." The next morning, Alexander stood outside Roosevelt Middle School. his palms sweating like a nervous teenager. He'd faced boardrooms full of hostile investors, delivered presentations to thousands, built a company from nothing but code and determination. Yet the prospect of meeting his 12-year-old daughter terrified him more than anything he'd ever encountered. Sophia emerged from the school building, Isabella at her side. Alexander's breath caught as he saw his daughter up close for the first time. She was beautiful, with Sophia's delicate features and his striking blue eyes. But more than that, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that reminded him of both her parents. "Isabella, there's someone I'd like you to meet," Sophia said gently, her voice steady despite the tremor Alexander could hear beneath the surface. Isabella looked up at the tall man in the expensive suit, her intelligent eyes taking in every detail. "You're Alexander Chen," she said matter-of-factly. "I saw your picture in Time magazine last month. You created the operating system that runs on like half the phones in the world." Alexander smiled, surprised by her directness. "That's right, though I had a lot of help from very smart people." "Mom says you knew each other in high school," Isabella continued, studying his face with unnerving intensity. "She also says you have something important to tell me." Alexander glanced at Sophia, who nodded encouragingly. They'd talked on the phone until 3 in the morning, planning how to break the news, how to help Isabella understand the complicated truth of her parentage. "Would you like to get lunch somewhere we can talk?" Alexander asked. "I know a place that makes amazing burgers." Isabella's eyes lit up with interest, but she looked to her mother for permission. "Can we, Mom?" "Of course, mija," Sophia said, though Alexander could see the anxiety in her eyes. This was uncharted territory for all of them. They walked to a small diner 6 blocks from the school, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. Isabella slid into one side of the booth, while Alexander and Sophia sat across from her, united in their nervousness. "So," Isabella said, picking up a French fry and pointing it at Alexander like a tiny sword, "what's this big, important thing you need to tell me? Are you and Mom getting married or something?" Alexander nearly choked on his water. "It's actually more complicated than that, Isabella. Can I call you Bella?" "Nobody calls me Bella except Mom when she's being mushy," Isabella said with a grin that was pure Sophia. "But I guess you can if you want." Alexander took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 15 years pressing down on his chest. "Bella, when your mom and I were in high school, we cared about each other very much. We were planning a future together, but then circumstances separated us before we could make those plans happen." Isabella nodded, her young face serious as she processed this information. "And then Mom had me." "Yes," Alexander said softly. "And we lost touch with each other for a very long time. But recently, when I met your mom again, I realized something important." Isabella's French fry paused halfway to her mouth. "What did you realize?" Alexander looked into his daughter's eyes, those familiar blue eyes that were like looking into a mirror from his past. "I realized that you're my daughter, Bella. I'm your father." The diner seemed to go silent around them, though the conversations and clatter of dishes continued unchanged. Isabella set down her French fry and stared at Alexander with an expression that cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been hope. "You're my dad?" she whispered. "Yes," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your dad. And I'm sorry it took so long for us to find each other." Isabella looked back and forth between her parents, her brilliant mind clearly working through the implications. "So when other kids asked me why I didn't have a father, it wasn't because he didn't want me. It was because he didn't know about me." Sophia reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "That's exactly right, Mija. Your father never knew you existed, and I thought it was better that way. I was wrong about that, and I'm sorry. Are you rich?" Isabella asked Alexander suddenly, with the blunt curiosity of a 12-year-old. Alexander laughed, despite the emotional weight of the moment. "Yes, I suppose I am." "Like really rich? Like private jet and mansions rich?" "Yes." Isabella considered this for a moment. "Cool. Does that mean I'm rich too now?" "Isabella Sofia Martinez," Sophia said, using her daughter's full name in the tone that meant business. "Money doesn't work that way." "Actually," Alexander said carefully, "in a legal sense, Bella is my heir. But more importantly, she's my daughter." which means she's the most valuable thing in my world, regardless of money. Isabella smiled at that, the first truly warm expression she directed at Alexander. That's a good answer. You get points for that one. I'm glad I passed the test, Alexander said, grinning back at her. They spent the next hour talking, Alexander answering Isabella's rapid-fire questions about his company, his inventions, and his life. But the questions that mattered most came near the end of their meal. Did you love my mom when you were kids? Isabella asked, her voice suddenly smaller, more vulnerable. Alexander looked at Sophia, seeing the girl he'd fallen in love with 15 years ago still shining through the woman she'd become. I loved your mom more than I thought it was possible to love someone. She was my whole world. And do you still love her now? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Alexander had built his fortune on calculated risks, but this felt like the biggest gamble of his life. Yes, he said simply. I never stopped loving her. Isabella turned to her mother with the same piercing directness. Do you still love him, Mom? Sophia's composure finally cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks as she nodded. Yes, Mija, I tried not to, but yes, I never stopped loving him either. Isabella sat back in the booth, a satisfied expression on her young face. Good. Because it would be really weird to have parents who didn't love each other. So what happens now? Alexander and Sophia exchanged glances, both realizing that their precocious daughter had just cut through 15 years of complication with the clarity only a child could possess. Now we figure out how to be a family, Alexander said, if you want that. If you'd like me to be part of your life. Are you kidding? Isabella said, her eyes lighting up. My dad is literally Alexander Chen. Do you know how cool that's going to make me at school? Plus, Mom's been working 2 jobs forever, and she's always tired. Maybe now she can just work 1 job and actually sleep. Sophia laughed through her tears. It's not quite that simple, baby. Why not? Isabella challenged. He's rich. He loves you. You love him. And I'm his daughter. Seems pretty simple to me. That evening, Alexander found himself in Sophia's modest apartment for the first time, sitting on her worn couch while Isabella showed him her room. The space was small, but filled with love. Every surface decorated with Isabella's artwork, and photos of mother and daughter adventures. She's incredible, Alexander said as Isabella disappeared into her bedroom to get her chest set. You raised an amazing daughter, Sophia. We raised an amazing daughter, Sophia corrected softly. She has your mind, your way of seeing straight to the heart of problems. I just provided the structure and the hugs. Alexander looked around the apartment, taking in the carefully maintained furniture, the bills stacked neatly on the kitchen counter, the photographs that chronicled 12 years of birthdays and school events, and quiet moments between mother and daughter. I miss so much, he said quietly. First steps, first words, first days of school. All those moments you can never get back. Sophia sat beside him on the couch, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of her shampoo. You can't change the past, Alexander, but you can be here for everything that comes next. First boyfriend drama, high school graduation, college applications. All the big moments are still ahead of us. I want to be here for all of it, Alexander said. The big moments and the small ones. Piano recitals and parent-teacher conferences and midnight trips to the emergency room when she has the flu. Even the boring stuff? Sophia asked with a small smile, helping with math homework and driving carpool and listening to her complain about her friends. Especially the boring stuff, Alexander said firmly. I've spent 15 years living in a penthouse that echoes with emptiness. I want noise and chaos and normal family problems. I want to worry about teenage attitudes and college tuition and whether she's dating boys who are good enough for her. Isabella emerged from her bedroom carrying an ornate chess set, her face bright with excitement. Dad, do you play chess? Mom taught me, but she's not very good. No offense, Mom. None taken, Micha, Sophia said with a laugh. I taught you what I could, but you surpassed me years ago. Alexander studied the chessboard as Isabella set up the pieces, recognizing the strategic mind behind her careful placement. I do play chess, Bella, though I have a feeling you're going to be a much tougher opponent than the business executives I usually play against. Probably, Isabella said with confidence that made both her parents laugh. I'm in the advanced tournament at school. We're going to state championships next month. State championships? Alexander repeated, impressed. That's incredible, Bella. Yeah, but Mom has to work that weekend, so she might not be able to come watch me play, Isabella said, not accusingly, but with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child used to disappointment. Alexander looked at Sophia, seeing the guilt and frustration in her eyes. How many moments had she missed because of work? Because keeping their small family afloat required constant sacrifice. What if your mom didn't have to work that weekend? Alexander asked carefully. What if she could take time off to watch you play? Isabella's eyes widened with hope. Could she? Really? I don't need charity, Alexander, Sophia said quietly, but without the sharp defensiveness he'd heard before. It's not charity, Alexander said, echoing the conversation they'd had 15 years ago when he'd tried to help her family. It's what families do for each other. They show up for the important moments. Sophia looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Alexander's sincere expression, and something inside her shifted. For 12 years, she'd carried the weight of single parenthood with fierce independence, never asking for help, never admitting she needed support. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to let someone else share the load. Okay, she said softly. If you're sure it's not too much trouble. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.